far more than applause, far more than virality, far more than anything that this lifetime can give you is to build that secret life with God. That was the only thing that I could give, was that piece of wisdom. I would be like, go, do it. Lock yourself away. Learn to hear the voice of God. Build an inner life with God, because like that's the true reward right there.
Well, welcome everybody to the Call for More podcast. Today is a podcast that I've been very, very, very excited to record, because I'm with not only one of my favorite people, but somebody that truly has inspired me. And Hannah, thank you so much for joining us. Hannah, when I met you, the first time we ever met, I had previously had read some of your books, but your book, Fighting Forward, I loved. And but when I met you in person, it's so cool to meet somebody that is truly better than even their own words, which says a lot. Like you are so full of wisdom, and you're so authentic, and you're so down to earth. And I remember we were both speaking at this conference together, and I never saw you in the green room, because you were just like out with the people, just loving on the people. No, me neither. And it's such an honor to know you, Hannah. And I'm just so grateful that a person like you exists right now.
Thank you. Oh my gosh, I'm like 2 seconds in and I'm already crying, but thank you. Yes, I felt like when we met, and I think we did meet in the green room, because I was probably like in my mind being like, get in the green room. You need to go and see what's in there. You know, there might be somebody in there to have a conversation with. And I immediately, it was like kindred spirit. It was like real knows real. And that was it for me and you and Jack. And you were like 2 weeks married or something.
No, literally, we flew back from our honeymoon and spoke at this conference that we're talking about is called Heart of Dating. And our friends run it. It's like, it had to inspire singles and those who are dating. And we had come back from our honeymoon straight away. I'm like, this is the way to do it. Like, start marriage right. Like, straight into ministry on purpose. Let's go. But Hannah, for people who have never met you, would you let them know like a little bit about yourself? But specifically, can you share the story of The World Needs More Love Letters and how that came into the world, and like a little bit about who you are?
My name is Hannah, and I am a writer and an author, and I am a huge mental health advocate. I am like so passionate about teaching people the power of rhythms and routines and self-discipline in order to combat depression, anxiety, and to optimize mental health. And so, yeah, I guess my story starts way back, almost like 15 years ago, which is crazy to think about. But I would say that story of The World Needs More Love Letters, it began when I was a senior in college, because that's the point that I started writing and I started blogging. Like, I knew this desire to write was inside of me, and this desire to make people feel less alone. And so at that time, blogs were just starting to boom, and I like got right in there. I started writing. I fell in love with the process. And shortly after I graduated from college, I moved to New York City to follow and pursue my dreams. You know, like, I was not a believer at the time, though I do feel like I knew something was there. I just didn't know what it was. I was working at the United Nations. I was living in the Bronx, and very quickly into that year after college, I started to feel really sad. And back then, we were not talking about depression. We were not shedding a light on mental illness. And so in my mind, it was just a matter of like, you just need to get stronger. Like, you just need to be better. Like, you just like, come on, why are you so sad? It wasn't until a few months later that I was actually diagnosed with depression. And then that's where, you know, once you have that diagnosis, a lot of times you can start to heal. You can put protocols into place. But for me, because I did not have that language and I did not want to tell anybody that I was depressed, I started writing letters to people that I would see on the subways, in coffee shops, like I'm a very empathetic person, and I always felt like as much as New York City is such a magical place, it also can feel like a deeply lonely and isolating place. And so to combat those feelings of loneliness, I just started writing and then leaving letters across New York City. And I wasn't looking to be found. I wasn't looking to like start a movement. I really was just trying to get these feelings out of me and then hopefully bring something to somebody else's life too. But a few months into doing this, I wrote a blog post about it. I let people know that I was doing this, and I just put out a simple ask at the bottom of the blog post. I was like, if you for some reason need a love letter, I'll write to you. And I thought like I'd get like two, three, one of them being my mom, but the post went like viral. And I spent the next year writing over 400 letters to strangers all over the world, mailing
400.
them. Yeah. And it sounds like amazing. And it was not at all. Like it was very much like, I want to be done with this. But I knew at that point in my life, I'm like, I want to be the kind of person that like follows through, that does the thing that she says she'll do. And so I wrote all of those letters to people all over the world. And that became the foundation for the organization that I run today. It was this realization that like the world really does need more love letters. And like, I set it up so that people could nominate friends and family members that were going through something tough, going through stories. They're the stories that are probably not going to go viral tomorrow. And then anyone from around the world could write a letter and mail it in to be submitted to a larger bundle of hundreds of letters showing up for somebody. And so yeah, she's 13 years old and it's crazy, but it's just such a God story looking back. You're like, oh my gosh, one girl with depression leads to all of these other outcomes.
Wow, that's so amazing. And it's so cool how in both of our stories, like my book, 3 Seconds of Courage, comes out January 28th. And for me, it was surviving a tsunami and then experiencing so much fear. And it was beach lifeguard training that got me out of myself. Like I was so terrified. I was also struggling with PTSD. And it's so cool how with your story too, it's the others. It's like I sometimes I feel like our hearts, it's almost like eyes that want to look within. And the fear or like our depression, it wants to look within. And often that's because there's just so much pain. But when we start looking, just having the boldness to look outside ourselves, that's the like so often the pathway to freedom and healing. And I also just love what you were sharing about your own story with mental health. And it's just true. Like we cannot heal what we don't reveal. And it's hard to live in a society sometimes that still is like, I come from New Zealand, that's still the culture there is still like, just pull your boots out, like just ignore it. But if we don't name our emotions and bring them out into the light, they just start to grow and grow and grow, especially those like harder emotions. But Hannah, in the midst of all of this, how did you meet Jesus?
It's funny. Okay, so we probably don't have 18 hours to get into this, but when I was in college, because my mom has always been a believer my whole life. She was, the only believer in our family. I, watched her go to church every Sunday, like without my dad. And it was always kind of just like a warped view of like Christianity, but I knew my mom, I knew her character, I knew her posture, and I was like, okay, like clearly there's something here for her, because like even when it seems like life is not necessarily being good to her, she keeps coming back to this thing. So there's something here. And I was always curious about that. And so honestly, I would say it started right before I moved to New York City that I picked up the book Blue Like Jazz by Donald Miller. And that was the first time that I felt like I had read a book where I was like, I could get on board with this. Like, I like the God that he's writing about. And that, looking back, makes so much sense of like, God would meet me in my favorite thing, language. Like, he would meet me in words. But when I got to New York, I remember praying this specific prayer. So it's like, I knew God was there. I just did not know if he was good or not. And my prayer specifically with God, like, I'm not going to look for you in a church. I'm not going to look for you in the Bible because I have a very hard time with both of these things, like from my past. I'm going to look for you in your people. So if you are in your people, show up. And then like all of this love letter stuff felt like God, like pulling back the curtain and being like, you said you were looking for me. It's right here. And like, I have a part for you to play in this story. And I think that that was the biggest moment for me because I think my fear throughout growing up was just like, I don't have a part to play in this story. I don't know if I really matter. I don't know if I'll ever leave my small hometown where like a lot of people like, you know, there's been a lot of loss. There's been a lot of sadness and heaviness. And so to get to play this role and to get to like show people the love of God through writing was like the biggest honor of my life. And so like through that series of events, I felt like there was no denying it. Like, and I got to this point where I was like, okay, like I think the missing part of this is Jesus. And I'm exhausted with trying to do it my own way. I can't do it my own way. Like my own way is not working. The depression is not lifting. I'm writing these letters and that's great, but like I need help. And that was when I asked Jesus to come into my life. And yeah, that was, we've been rolling ever since.
And can you share with us like a story where in the midst of your darkness that there was like a just like a special moment that you had with the Lord in the midst of like through your mental health journey?
Yeah. Well, I think too, like one of the things that I didn't know at the time when I dealt with depression for the first time is I thought that if you had depression once, you were like in the clear. You weren't getting it again. I thought it was like the chicken pox, basically. And I did not know that, like, statistically speaking, if you've dealt with depression once and then another time, like your likelihood of dealing with depression goes higher and higher. And so in 2014, I went through a round of really serious, severe depression that I nearly lost my life to. It was at the height of like, you know, speaking around the country, first book deal, all of this stuff that like from the outside, it looked like everything was good and my brain was broken. But I feel like in that time, I really feel like God like deconstructed or kind of demolitioned, really demolition would be the word, like the foundation that I had. I think the foundation that I had was like, yes, I love you, God, but like I was never certain if he loved me back. I was never certain if I was good enough. I was always working from a place of hustling to get approval. And then when you put that into like the lens of depression, that's just a recipe for disaster. Like you are not coming out of that pit if you think that God might be mad at you, if you think that God doesn't think you're good enough. And so that was really where he really did some foundational work. It's like, yes, you said yes to me, but like it was laid on a foundation of beliefs that were not true. And so like, it's like he paved a road of love and of like pulling me out of the darkness and rescuing me. And so it's one of those things where it's like, it was the darkest period of my life. And yet I would go through it 1,000 times more to get that outcome, to now know that like my relationship with God is in a good, healthy place. It's not based on approval. It's not based on like the things that I can do, the ways that I can perform.
Yeah, that's so good. Yeah, after surviving the tsunami when I was young, I had a lot of like survivor's guilt, and it was just this kind of like and it honestly wasn't healed until I finally met my spiritual mentor. Her name's Brenda, and I've been meeting with her for like 7 years or something now. But when I met her 7 years ago, I just remember her, she was like, tell me about your life. And at the time, I was just like full hustle mode. Like and I wouldn't take Sabbath. I was just like any moment in the day I had to do something. And I didn't realize that the root of that was because I felt like I owed God something. And I like and ultimately it's exactly what you're saying, Hannah. It came down to like a wrong belief of God. And one of my other mentors always says like, the most important question to ask yourself is, who do you believe God to be? And I just think about how I listened to a sermon the other day, and they were talking about as a concept of a cult, which maybe you've heard of, like dark night of the soul. And it talks about these seasons of our life where it feels like God is like quiet or absent. And in this sermon, I think it was John Mark Coe, he was saying like a third of people in the church right now might be experiencing this. Like, and it's those seasons in life where it just, you feel distant from God and you can't really like tangibly feel him and experience him. But it's those are the most important times for us to fight for our belief in God. And Hannah,
Yes.
what would you, like in the midst of your journey, what's been like the attribute of God that you've had to fight for the most? Like, is it that he loves you no matter what? Is it that you're good enough? Like, what is it that God has been saying to you over years, or God has been showing himself to you over years that you have had to like fight for more?
Oh, that's so good. I think definitely, and I feel like this is something that I've really dug into in 2024 was like God's benevolence, God's kindness. I think I missed that for a really long time. And I've always gotten like little glimpse of it, like especially from my mom, like I'll be like, oh, like I'm tired. Like my mom will be like, go take a nap. I'm like, yeah, but like then like, I won't have done anything. And like God's going to be mad at me. And like I might say it in like kind of a jokey way, but like really like you take that to heart, right? And my mom is like, that's not God. God would be like, go take a sleep and then we'll tackle it when you wake up. And I'm like, I always need to hear her voice of God, But like that, I would say has been something that I'm continually learning, something that I'm seeing now all over scripture. I just didn't have the eyes to see it before. And like just this reality of like, God calls me child before he wants to use me in any capacity, right? Like, it's like we can get so good at being like the soldier for God and like the send me, use me. And it's like, no, first I'm a child. And I think a lot of that has been rewritten through parenthood, like through being a mom myself now, where it's like, there's a scripture about like, who would ask their parent for bread and they would give them a snake? Cause like now I see it. I'm like, oh, my daughter made a Christmas list. I'm going to do what I can to like have these things under the tree. Why would I be like, great list? I think I'll give you this instead, And it's this reality of like, that's God our Father. He gives us the desires of our hearts. And when he doesn't, it's because he knows that there is something better for us. He knows that maybe that thing, we think it would be good for us. And he's like, yeah, you know what? You don't even know what that thing would do if you had it. And so it's like learning to trust God as my parent and learning to be in that role of child.
That's so good. Yeah, like I just think about the life of Jesus and how that moment when he's getting baptized, and the Lord is just like, this is my son in whom I love. And it's so cool. It's like God's like publicly declaring his love for his son. And yet at this point, Jesus hadn't done any miracles. Like we don't really know a whole lot about his life. And like, even this is what you're saying. Like, I think about how even as I'm like pregnant right now, like I'm carrying this baby within me. And I know I'm literally, as I'm sleeping, the Lord is knitting something in me. And it's like, I don't have to do anything for it. I just have to just like chill. And the Lord's like actively creating a being inside my womb, which is mind blowing. And then even when she's born, I'm not going to be mad at her when she's sleeping. But then I think that God would be like that at me, like when I'm not achieving. And that's why like Jack and I's like one of our favorite practices in life is Sabbath. And it's just like on Sundays, we turn off our phone and we have to fight for it. And like even this last month, it's been crazy with book launch stuff and just like a lot going on. We just moved. And so like we hadn't taken a Sabbath in a long time. And I just was like feeling the call from God to like come away with him and to just, and I was realizing sometimes when I get in that mode where I get like over helping mode, that's because I'm trying to avoid sitting down with God. There's like something that I'm like avoiding. So I just like, let's just overproduce and overdo and overhelp. But then at the same time, it has, as I look back on both of our lives, it has been not only our faith in God, but also our love for others that has gotten us out of these moments of fear and darkness. And so, Hannah, would you just whatever you want to say, but would you speak to that to like someone who is currently just like, I just think about how like a young girl who is struggling with social anxiety and she just doesn't want to go to that event that she has booked tonight. And that's because it just causes her just so much, like she just gets in her brain when she's like in that social event. But to think about that girl going to that event and then she makes friends with somebody and like just how when we can just take those little steps and we can look beyond ourselves, that there's so many miracles around us. And for you it was like writing letters, but I'm sure there's so many other ways. But can you speak to just how helping others can help us in the midst of our fear?
Yeah, absolutely. And I will say from the top too, like as somebody who does have anxiety, it's like, I don't know. I think I spent a lot of time waiting for that anxiety to lift and to go away. And I think part of it is still here. I literally, before I got onto this call, got a speaking inquiry and immediately was like shrouded in anxiety. I'm like, I don't want to go. But like, it's that initial feeling, but it's not the outcome. The outcome is like, even when I feel it, I'm still going to push myself into this space because I believe that God has something for me, whether that is a friend, whether that's a conversation, whether that's somebody I'm meant to meet, whether that's a gift for me. Like I'm going to go in eyes wide open with expectation. I think though we live in this culture where I think it's very easy to be very individual centric, like especially in the age of social media. You go onto social media and it's everybody documenting their lives and their fitness journeys and their health journeys. And like, that's good and beautiful. Like documentation is really beautiful, but I think it's making us like, if I'm being honest, I think it's making us really self-obsessed. And I see it even in the Christian realm. It's like, how do I build this platform that like, yes, is for God, but can very easily become about yourself? And I felt that for a long time, especially with social media. And the one thing that changed it and the one thing that kept me wanting to show up in this space is when I flipped it and said, it's not about me. It's about whoever I can serve, however I can serve them in whatever capacity. That's the only thing that has given me real, true, lasting joy. And I'm like, well, that makes sense because it's totally gospel centric. Like Jesus was for the other person. And I think we are to be too. And that doesn't necessarily mean that like that the way you serve is like, oh, you write a book and you give it to other people. That's beautiful. That can be part of it. But it's just as important that you see your neighbor and like make them a casserole, or you text your friend back, even though you feel overstimulated, or you make the coffee date, or you do the thing in your ordinary everyday life even if no one ever sees it. And I think that that's what's tough about our plugged in lifestyles is that we're like, well, we have to document it to prove that we did it. And it's like, no, you don't. You don't have to. Like, you could see your daughter right in front of you. You could see your friends right in front of you. You could see your husband. You could get off the phone and you can go serve them,
Yeah, that's so good. Yeah, growing up, my family would always say, like, be a secret ninja for Jesus.
Oh, I love that.
Would, like,
yes.
And so then they do like little things like I would very similar to you, like I would write letters to girls I knew were struggling in high school and be like, love your secret angel. And then my parents, when we would go out for lunch, would like give my sisters and I a credit card and we would go and pay for someone else's lunch.
That's beautiful.
And it's just like, it's so good for your soul to have a lot of aspects of your life that are unseen. Like, this essentially is making me emotional. It's just like, will we build up things that only heaven sees? Like, will we do it for the applause of one? Like, is God seeing it and only God seeing it enough for us? Like, that has to be. But we live, exactly as you said, in this plugged in world where we do it, and we do it so we can tell people, and we can do it so we can get the applause from other people. But it's just, can we build up, like, just think about just building up like these little golden nuggets up in heaven every time you do something, and Jesus is the only one that sees it.
I don't know. In the last year, I do my morning quiet time every single day. I've stopped calling it my morning quiet time. I call it my morning meeting because like I'm meeting with God, and like I'll do my Bible reading and my prayer journal and stuff. But like I will always especially when I'm overwhelmed, like spend time just listening, being like, God, here are my plans for the day, but what are your plans for my day? And like, I will write down what I hear. And it's usually these directives that have to do with like the people in my life, my husband, my daughter, my friends, maybe somebody I haven't thought about in a while. And it's always these like small, unseen things, but like, I think that that's what God is about. Like, yes, he will be with you on the stages and he will be with you on the platforms. Absolutely. But like when I look at the Heart of Dating conference, that was a beautiful conference. But what I remember was the conversation with you. Like, that's what I remember about it. And it's like, if that's why I call it my morning meeting, to just check in with God to be, okay, you told me to do this stuff yesterday and here was the outcome. And I totally see why you wanted me to do that. Oh, okay. Like I went to this conference. I felt a lot of social anxiety, but like, here's who I met coming out of it, you know? And it's like little by little, you're building this secret life with God that I'm telling you is like, it's the reward. It is the reward. Far more than applause, far more than virality, far more than anything that this lifetime can give you is to build that secret life with God. If I could give that to that was the only thing that I could give was that piece of wisdom. I would be like, go do it. Lock yourself away. Learn to hear the voice of God. Build an inner life with God because like that's the true reward right there.
Yeah, nothing can compare to the satisfaction that we get in the 1 hour or the 20 minutes that we spend with the Lord relative to anything else we do. And that is like, I'm the exact same way. I can't even remember a day where I didn't wake up and spend the morning with the Lord. Like I have to, because I notice when those mornings, those days, even though they're far and few between, the days when I wake up and I don't spend time with him, it's just, I'm just not the best version of Riley.
No, yeah.
I'm like, poor Jack right now is just, I'm like sassy and kicky. And practically, like, just for those that are listening, like, this has been something that's really helpful is one, and I feel like we may have talked about this one time, is like buy an alarm clock so that you don't have your phone in the room. And then two, charge your phone outside of the room and put it like kind of far away. So it's kind of hard to get in the morning. And for me, that's like in the office, which is like the door is shut. So I have to like practically like open the door if I want to go to my phone. And I do what I call like FaceTime before phone time. And it's just like, I have to spend time with the Lord before I check my phone. And there's studies that are done about how the first thing we get oxytocin from in the morning is a thing that we chase oxytocin for and for the rest of the day. It's like,
Yep.
And so like when we get up in the morning and we like look at our phones, and that's kind of what we want to like feed our souls throughout the day. But Hannah, in your book, like Unplugged Hours, you talk a lot about boundaries and rest. And so can you share with us about how like saying no, having boundaries, how all of those are acts of courage?
Yeah, I think like it's interesting because I was just having a conversation with somebody who was older than me. She's in her 60s, but she was talking about how like within her generation growing up, it was like you don't say no to anything. And I think that's kind of where it came from. It's like, oh, the people in her 60s are our parents, right? And so like a lot of that like feeling of like I have to say yes to everything. If it comes my way, I've got to say yes to it. And it's like, I guess I'm learning, no, I don't have to. We don't have to go to all the birthday parties. We can definitely go to some of them and be intentional with that. But if it's like causing me to live this like hurried existence and this existence where I'm not present ever, then I don't want it. I will say like, I feel like rest is a piece of the puzzle that I missed for a really long time. And that goes back to what we were talking about earlier is like, I didn't believe that I could take a break because I didn't actually believe that like, I don't know that I believed that God was doing a better job than I was. And once that belief changed, it was the reality of like, I'm not holding the world together. Like I can take a break. And I learned in taking a break and resting, like, it's not like you don't have to do it. It's not anywhere that it's like, you have to do this. You have to take a break. Like but you are the beneficiary when you do. Like when you choose to take a Sabbath break, because I'm the same way. My Sabbath starts Friday when the computer shuts down and it goes until Saturday until sundown. And I made that switch simply because we go to church on Sundays and sometimes fight in the parking lot and putting pants on doesn't feel restful to me. So I moved my Sabbath over to Friday into Saturday. And it's so funny because like I was reflecting on the fact that like when I first started taking a Sabbath, like it was a digital Sabbath. So it'd be like a break from my phone. And then the more that I got into it, the more I realized like the phone was not the issue. It was my inability to turn off, my inability to like not be doing something or not be working on something. And so that's really what I've had to work on over the last few years is like, no, in my Sabbath, I don't do anything that could push the needle forward. None of it. Nothing. I'm not doing social media. I'm not checking emails. I am choosing to trust that God has my future in his hands and I'm taking my hand off the wheel and I'm watching Lifetime movies and I'm like reading books and spending time with my family and going to brunch and being with friends and like trusting that not every moment of our lives has to be productive for it to produce something in us.
Yeah, that's really good.
Hard though.
Jack and I were, it's so hard. And even kind of, this is slightly different, but it's kind of on the same lines as even Jack and I were talking about our pastor that we were under and followed when we were in San Diego, and he living in San Diego, and he would have at least one meeting per week with somebody that had no personal gain for him, and just like somebody who like it might have been hard to be with that person, or it might have been draining to be with them. And I loved that because we were reading this morning about James and how it says like, do not like elevate the wealthy person in church, like treat the wealthy and the poor the exact same way. And it goes on to say like, even you favoring people in church is like a sin. And I was like, whoa, because I just like, I feel like I see that a lot in society, but I completely miss that. But like having like pockets, it's kind of like, this is a slightly, you're talking about like rest and being with the Lord and like just being okay with the moments that's unproductive, but then also helping others and the so many themes of both of our lives and both the things that we love talking about, you and I, Hannah, is like also finding places where you're doing things and it's not productive. And it's like you're helping and you're loving people and it's costing you a lot and you're not gaining much in return. That's really good for you. Like I think about how Jesus spent like half the day's journey going to visit this man that was demonized and lived in a cave. And he had a whole crowd of people on the other side of the lake waiting for him, like thousands of people.
Yeah.
I ditched all of them, went to go help this one man. And when you look at it and you know that he only had 3 years of ministry time, it was so inefficient and ineffective, but he did it for this one person.
So good. So good.
Yeah. But Hannah, as we end here, I would just I would love for you to share like any practical, actually, this is definitely something I've learned a lot from you through books and through you as a person is being someone that is willing to lean on community and bringing people into your pain. And so could you share with us, like, whether that's a story or a practice that you have about welcoming people in those moments that we were kind of talking about earlier, when it's like just feels overwhelming and it feels like there's a lot of fear, and the importance of a person or of community in those moments, in those seasons of our lives?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's incredibly important to like let people in, to not stay isolated, and like it's obviously really easy to like want to be isolated, right? It's like it feels easier. Like you don't want people to think that you're messy. I think it's like, and I think this about a lot of the things within the kingdom, is like a lot of the things that God wants for us to experience, like come with like these rinse and repeat for best results, like instructions. And so like in terms of that, it's like not just let people in when you're in like the biggest pit of depression in your life, but like letting people into the hard stuff, like I've got a group of girlfriends that like we read a chapter of scripture every day together. It's a group text. We started it in 2022, I think it was. But like this group text has morphed into this like support system though, where I know at any given moment in the day when I'm having a hard time, when like I'm having a hard momming moment, I can text them and bring it out into the light. Like I think about like, one of my friend's little sisters who I've like walked with some relationship stuff with, and she's going through a breakup right now, and she desperately wants to reach out to him and talk to him. And she texted me the other day to just let me know that like she wanted to and she didn't. And I was like, amazing. Amen. Thanks for letting me into that. Like that's because shame can't fester when we let people in. And so like just on like a personal practical note, like here I am, we're in the middle of January when we're recording this. January is a beast. I mean, because there's no holidays, you're coming off the Christmas high and like you have less sunlight. And so like the last 2 days have felt like mentally really hard for me. I can now look at this conversation and be like, this makes sense. Like, right? Like, it's like you need a refresher course in the things that you are talking about. But like, I just texted my friend Haley yesterday and just let her in from the jump of like, I don't feel like doing anything today. I want to go back to bed. And then I told her I'm going for a walk. And then I told her this is what I'm doing next. And we just did that all throughout the day. And it was like, okay, this is community. This is how we live and we show up for one another, is to let people know where you are. In this day and age, people can't find you if you don't tell them where your location is.
Yeah, that's so good. That's so good. Hannah, I just love that so much of what you write and is what you live out. And so much of what you speak is also what you live out. And as we end, Hannah, thank you so much. You were an endorser for my book, 3 Seconds of Courage.
Yeah.
And like one of the chapters I talk about the ministry of presence and just like how it's like a ministry not only to like show up in people's lives, but also let them show up in your life too. And there's a study about post-traumatic growth versus post-traumatic stress. And it's like people who have gone through the same traumatic experience, how is it that some of them are able to grow through it and grow, like have lived through something really hard and actually end up like thriving on the other side. And a huge part to play in that, and the difference between growth and stress, is their ability to let people in, even if it's just one person, like even if it's just like, and it's crazy for me when I look around my life, like the power of just one person. Like when I had therapy for 6 months when I moved to America, and there was just like a lot I realized I had not dealt with. And I went to therapy every single week for 6 months. And my friend would come to my apartment after therapy with a box of chocolates and just sit with me. And like, most of the time we were not chatting about like therapy and what I talked about. We were just chilling with each other. And like in this story of Job in the Bible, like he had his friends that after he went through so many hard things, he just had friends that showed up and sat with him for 7 days. And so like we need that, and we can also be that to other people. But Hannah, like just my last question to you is just any last words for people who are going to read this book, 3 Seconds of Courage, or people who are currently listening to this right now and feeling a lot of fear, and just like practically or spiritually, like whatever you want to say to them about like living that life of courage.
Gosh, I feel like we've covered so much ground. I do feel like, like it's right there in the title itself of like 3 seconds, right? It's like the person that you want to be, the person that you tell yourself all the time, maybe like, I'm so far from becoming that person. Like that person exists in small things and in split-second decisions, right? Of like, I said I want to do this thing, so I'm going to do it. And it doesn't mean that it has to be this big goal. Like it could be something very small. And so for the person that feels like really overwhelmed, or like maybe you set a bunch of like New Year's resolutions, but you're like, now what do I do? Or like, I have so much that I want to do. I would say like, break it down. Like, break it down into the smallest 3-second task and just do that one thing. Write it down, cross it off the list, come up with the next one. Because like, that is honestly, as a person with anxiety and depression, how I live most of my life. Like, my to-do lists are like, that's a task that will take 5 minutes. So we have 5 minutes. Like, even this morning, like, feeling really gloomy, not wanting to get started, I set a timer for 10 minutes. I picked 3 easy tasks and I checked them off the list. And so it's like being willing to partner with yourself and realizing that all the small stuff adds up. And so, yeah, I would say don't belittle the seconds and don't belittle the minutes and don't belittle the small things, because that's where life is.
Thank you, Hannah. Thank you for joining me and sharing your wisdom with all those that listen to Cool for More podcasts. And Hannah has so many incredible books. My favorite book of yours is Fighting Forward. And a lot of what we had talked about in this conversation, you just expand on. And I love that book also has such a theme of just like the moments and like just what does it look like to fight forward in the moments and how to bring community into it and how do we bring Jesus into it. And so Hannah, thank you for joining me today. It's such a gift. It's an honor to know you, and it's a gift that we all get to just like soak up from your wisdom.